be sufficient.
Mhm.
As long as we have some kind of legal opinion from her about that, we can then reference that in whenever we're filling out this questionnaire. And so she's in the process of doing that. Hopefully we'll have that back for you in a subsequent meeting.
Okay. Any other comments or questions in regards to this? Seeing none. Number 5, EDC President and Staff Report. Jim?
Okay, we've had no additional foils or complaints since the last meeting. As you just heard about the loan portfolio from Deanne, important to note that when the payments for the 2 that are currently suspended essentially reemerge, I did speak with Kirsch yesterday, and I've asked them to come make a presentation to us at next month's meeting to provide us with an update. I have an indication that they will do that. And their loan is set to essentially restart on the 1st of July. As far as the one that we just went through with Nettle Meadow, when their payments start, they were interest only for the period of disbursement of the additional funds. So it will not be the payment structure that was in place before. It will be the payment structure that's been defined as part of the new agreement. In terms of potential applicants, we still have 2 that are in some form of process with us where they've begun the process of filling out an application. They're experiencing delays that don't have anything to do with us, either associated with their project or their ability to bring the cost estimates to the application. Deanne continues to meet with them, and I'm still confident that one or both will eventually emerge. There's been interest from a whole wide swath of potential suitors, but no one has begun the process of formally filing an application with us out of that. I would say there's probably 5 in the last month that have contacted our office and asked for how the process would work. Some of which are significant, not all of which I believe are probable. But just the uptick in interest is encouraging to me. And also, I think a function of some of the increased exposure that we've had over the past year. We continue to try to market through the normal channels, but I think some of the conversations that we've been having about the LDC's role in whatever we do has essentially created more interest in the LDC. It's also interesting that there are parties in Glens Falls who are trying to decide whether it makes more sense for them to go through the city's process or this process. That's a new development. We continue to coordinate that with the city every time that occurs. We're not in any way like actively soliciting city, applicants, but I think what they may be seeing is that there's either more capital available here, or the things that we're talking about may be more relevant to them in terms of what their plans are than the way that the city has traditionally approached their LDC. Now, Jeff Flagg, who runs the city's LDC, and I meet regularly. So every time that happens, we coordinate between the 2 of us. In terms of the last series of activities we went through last month to try to put the new loan process in for what we refer to as Lamazoo here, but we oftentimes call Nettle Meadow. That first payment has actually been dispersed. There is a whole series of meetings that continue to go on with outside support, both the SBA and their active business counseling program is in motion now. And there were a series of things associated with sales and marketing and their business partners that have also made progress since the last time we met. What I'll probably ask her to do, I didn't do in this meeting simply because a week is not a long enough period of time to provide a status update, but I think we will ask for some kind of update on how they're proceeding with all of those what we consider to be necessary pieces of good faith progress so that we can hopefully make subsequent disbursements. But I know that was a lot of work for everyone, and I do believe that they're on firmer ground. We will also monitor their ability to secure the funds from the state and report to you about that. We're in dialogue with ESD about that.
Questions?
Sure.
How much was the first disbursement from us? 50,000.
50,000.
And will that be bifurcated as kind of two different loans on the spreadsheet at the end of next month or as of May 30th?
It's not on the spreadsheet.
But it will be next month.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And each payment that we make will adjust the balance in the subsequent, payment and amortization schedule. That's everything in terms of, well, I shouldn't say that there, even though there's not a bullet here, I should update you about the work that Mark and I have been doing since the last meeting. He's our committee of one, helping us evaluate alternate investment streams. And the two that we're most aggressively pursuing right now are the development of potential housing related funding, and actually gave to Mark a first draft of a builder loan program to review yesterday. Kara helped us draft this once she was through with all the transactional stuff on Nettle Meadows. And she modeled it after a larger program at the state, which is a little bit more cumbersome, but we, in terms of being able to kind of compare it, I provided him with the details about that program as well, so he could kind of see how does that match with a larger state program that was designed for larger scale development, but pointed at much the same need, which is pre-development cost. What I'd like to do on this is get some feedback from Mark, and then I'm probably going to informally socialize it with some of the builders that we're in dialogue with to see what their reaction would be before we put it out for any kind of formal comment. What I'd like it for it to be is reasonably targeted to the things that we're talking about and worth people taking time to engage with. And so that is all in motion now. What was interesting from the builders that we've talked to is that their timing, I thought that they would be very focused on how quickly can you make something like this available. At least the small number of builders that we're engaged with so far said if a program like this were to emerge this year, it would be valuable to them and they would take advantage of it. They do not feel like they have to have it the next 30 or 60 days. They would like line of sight to know whether or not this is something that is going to emerge this year in terms of the planning that they're doing around projects that they're considering in Warren County. And then we continue to try to find more and more builders that we can engage with. So that community continues to grow. Deanne helped us orchestrate a forum where we had some of these builders together with the IDA, provided an update on some of the incentive programs that they have that would be available to housing development. And Ethan came and gave a presentation about the housing study itself. We're gonna have another forum with builders in 2 weeks. And that one, HCR will be making a presentation about some of the programs they have with a specific focus on one. What was the program that we're?
3 programs, actually. One, AHOP, which is a program that subsidizes the construction of single family homes, subsidizes them like 150 to 200,000 per unit. And the other 2 are for small rental, for either the rehab of an existing apartment complex or the construction of a small apartment complexes.
So that process is going on in parallel with all of this effort, and it's being orchestrated by the EDC, but to the benefit and alignment with what we're doing here at the LDC. We'll continue to make sure you're aware of those sessions. You're certainly welcome to attend. We had pretty robust participation in the first one. I think the other thing that I've talked to Ethan about is the idea of bringing out if we were going to do a case study or an example of how a development might be promoted that would address some of the needs in the housing study. I don't want to get in front of the study that LaBella is doing, but for instance, we all know, for instance, that senior housing is one of the areas of need. So I had suggested to him that perhaps we could start to do a case study where we would say, well, if we wanted to incent some senior housing and to create the flow through of, say, existing housing stock that some of those seniors might vacate in order to take residence in the new housing, what other components might we want to investigate, like either deed restrictions or covenants that would essentially provide a pathway where somebody who entered into the new housing development might have an incentive to create some kind of covenant or deed restriction on the sale of their home that would facilitate some of our goals, like a resident that would be living year round in that community. And so this doesn't necessarily have to do with the funding as much as it does the mechanics of how we might develop an RFP for something like that. And the reason that I wanted to do these tangible examples is I wanted to find out right away from the builders whether that became a turnoff to them to where that would disincent them to engage, or whether to them they were ambivalent about it. And while we have the audience with the builders, I want to present them some of these tangible cases to get their feedback on that as well. So I think he's working on helping us develop kind of that case study right now.
Jim, if you don't mind, could you have a notice to the board members when that next event will be?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think housing is one of the most important things we're facing, and to have all the builders in a room, I would love to be there and listen.
Yeah.
for sure.
It's an interesting situation because they have a common interest in gathering information, but they hold their cards close to the vest when they're with their
Yeah,
competitors.
Of course.
We learn a lot in our one-on-one conversations with them, and then we try to make sure that everyone has access to the same information in terms of the resources.
Yeah, and when we talked, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no,
Yeah, when Jim and I talked about this, I was not clear about deed restrictions. He explained it to me. 40,000 foot view, I guess. But I went back and I looked at it more, and I think it's a brilliant idea if we can do that, because what I think it does is it maintains a certain population in our community.
Mhm.
That population being teachers or EMS or people that we need that would otherwise, as we talked about before, which was kind of a lightning bolt to me, we could build all these houses. And people from the city go, well, I can buy this condo right here for $120,000 instead of spend so nobody, that the property doesn't land in the hands of the people we want it to land in. So I just wanted to mention that. I think that, Jim's done really good work on this, and I think it's a brilliant idea.
And I personally know one couple that would jump on this right away.
I think the demand is there. I think understanding the mechanics and how it can survive legal challenge and
Mhm.
scrutiny is
Yeah.
where we want to get started on this. I don't think we want to wait until we're ready to push an RFP out to start.
So I'm sorry. So Jim, we talked about, what Gene's problem was in Luzerne years ago, I guess now it's been. Does it make sense to talk to Kara about where we are now?
Yeah, and the state has taken a very different position. Gene has shared in previous versions of LDC meetings, the efforts that he underwent in Lake Luzerne to build a facility like the one we're talking about, and how he was stymied by the challenge to the notion that only residents could apply. And that violated the state housing discrimination laws. And so they wound up abandoning the project. Gene can provide a lot more detail about it. But what's different now is that the state, because of this same program, this, interest in smart growth communities, has created an infrastructure that would be a safe space to do this in if it meets those goals and the community has already signed up for those things. So I think a lot of it has to do with whether the public has had an opportunity to engage in that decision. And if they have, and a community still opts in, that does go a long way towards satisfying the need to make sure that this was a conscious decision and that it's consistent with housing policy of the state. That said, this is a vexing area, and Kara, by the way, is probably going to run somewhere into something that goes beyond her expertise, and we may have to look for legal counsel that specializes in this, but I'll wait for her to tell us that. I do think, though, that what's interesting is that so far, every scenario that we've ever developed has not been dismissed immediately as impractical or undoable.
Mm.
And that's positive. There are communities in upstate New York that have begun putting some of these things in practice. And so we're also trying to monitor those and see what has or has not worked there and what's been the experience of the communities, particularly in Old Forge. They've They've done some of this. So we have relationships there that it's new. It's all happened in the last year. So, I'm not sure that there's a full determination yet, but we can at least learn from some of the challenges they had and any rework that they had in the process. We're doing a lot of work in between meetings here, which, might not be obvious to everybody if they're not attending these forums. But I'll tell you, the builder community is aware of it. That they're grateful. They show up every time we have a forum, and their feedback, I think, has been universally consistent that this is a real asset. I mean, you know better than me because you talk to them more than me, Deanne.
The programs, they didn't know about them at all, and it surely is going to take a while for them to incorporate these programs into the projects that they have lined up. But they are, they've hired a consultant to help them understand and work with the programs, and they are trying to work them into projects upcoming. And those programs, HCR programs, have, as part of the program, there's a deed restriction element that is, that helps to keep, so any project that uses those HCR programs will have a deed restriction in it.
So that's the first of the two areas that Mark and I are working with.
So if I may deviate for just a second, Jim, and this is more EDC related, but are all these builders part of the EDC members?
Some of them, not all of them.
No, I think that's a separate conversation, but
No.
Have you engaged with the Michaels group?
yeah, Michael's group is a member and has, they have not attended these sessions, but they have been a member of the EDC for,
They're not currently a member, actually, but we have engaged with them, yes.
One of the principals is a friend of mine, and he said he's not disinterested from building in Warren County. But they're very philanthropic in this area too, with the YMCA,
Yeah.
things like that.
So the builders that we've met have a philanthropic thinking. Like this perception of builders as being really greedy has been, that I can dismiss that now. The builders that we've met have a sense for what they're giving to the community and how they are serving a need and how they would like to better fit into the housing study needs that.
and the modest number of builders that we have are actively engaged in housing projects now in Warren County. So they're not, like poking at this, they're already in. So they know both the goods and the bads of how those processes have played out so far. And I think they're eager to try to do more, which is, to me, the best ones to get feedback from, because they're already, generating progress for us. The second of the areas that I've been working with, Mark, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention this, and I haven't thought about it too much, but when we talk about the potential for incenting development by providing this 25,000, we tossed around the idea for pre-development. The first thing I thought is we have $1.5 million, 25,000 is not a lot of money. The idea was we provide it and it's paid back by the builder.
Well, it depends. If the project doesn't advance, but we've at least created a construct
Yep.
where if, for instance, we were to pursue this senior housing thing because it's a strategic goal and we believe that an incentive is going to be necessary in order for it to advance, we could make it a grant based on them successfully getting approval and building it.
Performance, yes.
Right.
Yep. I would be all for that.
And the reason we set 25,000 was not because we believe that that's the right optimal number, but we wanted to trial it
Yep.
and give you an opportunity to pilot this before you committed significant funds to it.
Which the board designated funds that we set aside.
So essentially, this is X our budget. In next year, let's imagine that we tried this and felt like this was worth doing. We would literally set a line item in the budget that said, we wanted to set some larger number available, and we would monitor that as its own loan or investment fund.
Mhm.
And this year, what we've essentially done is just say that the funds that are accruing that were X budget, the high interest and settlement funds will become the pilot fund for us to try these things.
Mhm.
And that's true both in the housing arena and the second area, which we've been working on, which is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I had hoped to meet with Bob Bullock together with Mark, but I wound up meeting with them one at a time yesterday. And the notion of expanding the entrepreneurial ecosystem has about 4 or 5 moving parts to it. One is adding more resource so that businesses like the one we just went through with Nettle Meadow Farms have a program that they can tap as they're attempting to scale. So not necessarily a startup, but a company that is been in place for some period of time and is now facing the issues of growing. We call that a second level. And then there's a third level, which is ongoing support for everybody that's ever been through the program. That essentially means that there's always somebody that they can call on for, whether it's legal advice or financial advice or things like that. I could call it an ongoing support community. That's one element that we've talked about with Bob. Second element is that he would like to try to increase the interest in startup ADK, not simply to drive more applicants, but to create more energy around the program. And he had suggested potentially trying to form an award. I still don't think we have enough detail to even present a straw man to you on that. And there are pros and cons associated with that. The reverse marketplace that we talked about, where we would take some ideas of things we wish there was a business in. And we've talked, for instance, in this forum about increased septic capacity, for instance, that either an existing septic company could, step into, or a net new one might say, well, it looks to me like they want it and they're ready to help fund it. So now what we would be doing is vetting somebody to be the right entity to take advantage of that. And it would all be under the umbrella of Startup ADK. We're having a conversation about whether that's best done at SUNY Adirondack as the location, or whether it's best done with SUNY Adirondack as the actual administrator of the program. There's pros and cons about that. I think one of the things he's worried about is if things change in the direction that comes from the state, and if there's a leadership change, that occurs at the college, whether or not that would impact the viability of something we want to be in place for a number of years. So this reverse marketplace, though, is the place that I think we're most committed to trying to put something in place by the fall, to at least have a small, maybe limited offering of 2 to 3 ideas that we had started to build a pro forma and a business plan around, and trying to attract people into the program who would go through the program as participants, just like they had come with a business plan, but instead they're essentially there to learn the things that we feel they need in order to be granted the startup capital and the opportunity to build that business that we've framed out. That to me is probably going to be step one. I asked Bob to come and make a presentation with me in next month's meeting about this. But I also asked him to kind of put these other steps and what he thinks might be the right timing and what resources might be required in order to do them over, say, a multi-year period, so that we could find an evolutionary path on this. I will say that we are really, really fortunate to have him here. He spends his days in the mornings. He teaches classes at SUNY Adirondack on a whole variety of things. And then he spends his afternoons at the prison working on, he basically teaches and runs the program for those that are incarcerated. And then he does SUNY Startup ADK at night. He's the former leader of the Rockefeller Center. I mean, he's a really well-known guy. I went to go see Dave DeMarco, the president of Glens Falls National, the other day, and I was talking through some of the work we're doing on Startup ADK. He said, "Have you met Bob Bullock yet?" I said, "Yeah, Bob and I are working on this together." He said, "Well, then whatever it is, you've got our support," because he's fantastic. That kind of resource is unique. I don't know how long we'll have him, but we want to take advantage for as long as he's there. He's got tremendous ideas and vision and the wherewithal to help us make these things happen. And I also really admire how he's spending his time.
So Jim, one of the things that just came to mind after you mentioned that, the Lake George area is filled with a lot of successful business people that may have just kind of said, it's time for me to kick back and enjoy the lake or something like that. I'm wondering if we might be able to tap into some of that knowledge to help even expand this faster.
Yes. And I think we've talked about this. SCORE is kind of the ongoing component that the SBA manages for that, where retired executives can make themselves available to become mentors and resources to startup businesses that apply to the SBA. I think what we're looking for is more of an advisory group that could be tapped for specific expertise of, like if you came out of a sector that is hospitality related, that you might help somebody review their business plan, but not necessarily an ongoing active role with the business the way that SCORE works. I want to make sure we don't try to replicate something that already exists.
Maybe you might-
Well, yeah,
He runs the.
yeah, it just,
But
my
that's-
mind is racing right now.
Well, that's a
You're right,
that's a
Vinny.
great point that you raised. And it's interesting because Bob raised the same thing. He said, we need to create a network of people, both resources
No.
and people who've been through the program and keep it together.
Mhm.
So we're another one of the 5 moving parts here is creating a forum where all of the people who've ever gone through Startup 80K get brought back together and they get invited to everything we ever do. And that they're also being asked about their experiences and also what they wished they had been available to them. And creating the advisor piece of this
Mhm.
to that community is a part of what he is all about. At his most recent graduation ceremony, he had basically what you're talking about up on stage. He had Bert Weber from Common Roots, and he had a number of other business leaders from the community, and they had both a panel discussion and they answered questions from all of the various people who had just gone through the program. So that was his first foray and try to bring that kind of resource in. And I think what he wants to do is codify that and make that, he's looking for help so he can fund a better program, essentially a better marketed, maybe more elaborate kind of event that will attract more people. And I said, those are the kind of things that I think the LDC and the EDC would both be interested in helping to sponsor and support.
Yeah, and I think a gathering like that maybe sooner rather than later, might be the midsummer, might be appropriate, because remember the thing we did when the RPI guy came up, RPI, I'm Clarkson. So, RPI guy came up here, for that, the Lake George project.
Yeah.
We can rent that space again, invite all those people there for a big meet, then that they can, if they have a chance to.
He's partial to doing it at SUNY Adirondack at Northwest Bay, but I'm okay no matter where he wants to do
Well,
it.
yeah, but I'm just saying, something like a forum like that, that way they could network and then they can, and we can get some of these people together and have an afternoon of.
Well, we're going to get a formal presentation to you next month. And I think that some order of these handful of ideas in terms of what he's going to propose to do first and what he would be looking for in terms of support from the LDC will be part of that presentation.
Yeah.
And our goal is, at least by the fall, to start to have some investable first steps to grow this entrepreneurial ecosystem. So encouraging work there, and we'll continue to meet in between our LDC sessions with Mark to advance this.
And just to say, if Bob coming from the Rockefeller Center, he could have gone anywhere. After leading that, he could have gone anywhere. He came here, and like Jim says, the guy, having done that, he's got depth. I mean, he knows people that we'd never be able to pick up the phone and call, so.
Yeah. And he's seen a lot of things that work and don't. So all that's really great. So that's my full report. It looks like Mike just stepped out, but I want to make sure before we lose anybody that we get the whatever resolutions and approvals done. Maybe somebody else could advance the motions.
Sure, so I guess I can do that. So let's first go ahead and get a motion, if I can, to approve the April 24 financials we went through earlier. Nate with the motion
I'll make a motion.
and Nancy with
Nancy
a second. All right, any discussion? All those in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. The
I'm sorry,
next-
was that Nate and Nancy?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Then Mike's back, so he can take it up from here. On the second resolution, Mike, I picked up while you went out to do your stuff. No problem. It's just
The financials are done. You're on the first resolution.
No heavy lifting there, man.
So there's 2 more resolutions to reinvest Warren County LDC funds into a new CD. So I need a motion, Mark and Dave. Nate, sorry for avoiding you again. Any questions, comments? I have one Deanne, what's our future rate gonna look like? Any idea?
So we are only investing if the threshold that we set is 4%. So if it's over 4%, and last I checked, they were still in the high 4%, 4.7, 4.8 something.
Any other
But
questions?
they could change actually by June 11th. So I'll send out an email with the current.
Okay,
rates.
But yeah, the resolution is contingent on it being in the band
Yep.
that we talked about.
Anything above 4. I should read the resolution, the next resolution.
so let's deal with this resolution first.
Oh,
or-
yes.
So, I have one more question. If it drops below 4, what's happening?
That's my question.
Well, then essentially that money would drop into the general fund and we would come back to you the following month to determine what you wanted to do.
Okay,
So you would lose a month in terms of the interest bearing.
You?
uh,
Do you guys want to abandon the threshold?
I think it's very unlikely that it's going to drop below 4 in that period of time, but I do think that we need to address this issue because at some point it may.
Mhm.
So my take to you is that I think you're okay for this one, but before the next one comes up, we may want to consider whether we want the ban to either be extended or an additional contingency added.
Go ahead, just table it till next meeting.
okay. Table it till next meeting?
Or do you want to talk about it? We can talk about it now. It's up to you. But
It's up to this committee or this board.
Nate,
Well, I think we should approve this resolution as is. We have a first and second, and then discuss it, be ready to
Okay,
discuss an amendment to a resolution.
future
res-
resolutions.
All right.
Okay. So if that's consensus of the board, let's have a vote. All those in favor? Renewing the CD? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Deanne, now we need a resolution. You're gonna read the resolution about the metal loan
Do I need to read both of them or just the revision?
Just a
revision.
Revision.
So this is an approval of a revision to the LDC resolution that was passed at our last meeting for a loan modification for Luma Zoo, AKA Nettle Meadows. Whereas on May 3rd, the board approved a loan modification to an existing and outstanding loan with Luma Zoo. And whereas in order to preserve the LDC's priority position and to properly secure its new loan in the maximum amount of 150,000, it was determined that it is in the LDC's best interest to require the board to execute a new note and mortgage for said loan. And now therefore be it resolved that the LDC board hereby amends its May 3rd, 2024 resolution to approve a new note and mortgage in the amount of 150,000 to be dispersed in accordance with terms and conditions set forth in the attached term sheet. Members of the board of directors voting,
Okay,
So I want to make sure I'm clarifying this. If we had not done it this way, we would have automatically either been required to get every other creditor's assent to this modification in order to hold our position in terms of recovery of any assets, or we would automatically default to being at the bottom. And what this essentially does is preserves our position on the previous note. So whatever we're owed on the previous balance, we maintain our position. And then this essentially is a net new note where we're essentially assuming whatever role was advanced as part of their security for it, which quite honestly is not better, but it doesn't require us to reorient on the previous.
so let's have a motion first to move forward with this. Nate, thank you on the first. Mark, on the second.
I didn't want to raise my.
I know, everybody wanted to give Nate a chance. So,
Mark?
Mark. I did both.
do we have any questions, comments, concerns?
Good.
Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes also. Moving on to number 7, executive session if appropriate.
I wasn't sure whether or not you would want to go into an executive session to talk about our upcoming loan that will reassert with Kirsch. That's up to you, but I will just, especially for you, Dave, that just walked in, I do want to reassert to you that I did make contact with Donnie DeVito of Kirsch yesterday. And he did agree to come update the board at next month's meeting with a business update. He has not made any indication of any other action he might seek. He simply said he will provide an update. I just do want to tell you that the possibility does exist that he would make some requests there, but it hasn't been proffered to us, so I have nothing to share with you.
Are there
I,
other things we should discuss?
well, I think if you wanted to go into detail about them and anything that we may be aware of in terms of that would be appropriate in executive session because that has to do with
Okay.
discrete conversation.
I'd like to go to executive session.
So, so there's a motion to move into executive session to, and I'm not sure what the legal terms is, but we're talking about specifics about a business
finances
entity
of
and the financials. Okay. So we have a first and we have a second? Second? Here we go.
They're trying to decide who to-
Mark,
We've been in so many executive sessions in the last 30 days.
all right, so we gotta
I don't want to.
suspend the recording and the broadcast here.
So the second was Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we will see you outside of executive session.
Let us know when you